do this. I'm Dave Blei. If you're looking for a postdoc or want to work with me as a grad student, I'm moving to Columbia in the fall, so apply there. I'll be in the statistics department and the computer science department. Okay, so I'm going to talk about probabilistic topic models and user behavior data. And so what's the idea behind probabilistic topic models? As Leslie mentioned, the idea is that we have these massive archives of text collections now. And we want to do things with them. We want to organize them, visualize their contents, summarize their contents, search through them, sometimes predict something about the documents, in general, understand what's in them. And what topic models do is take a big unorganized collection of text and organize it. In comes text, out comes an organized collection. And the basic idea is these three steps. First, discover the underlying thematic structure in the collection using an algorithm. Then annotate the documents according to that structure. And then finally use those annotations as though they were put in there by people to visualize, organize, summarize, predict whatever it is you're trying to do with the document collection. So here's an example of the output of a topic model. In came, I think, 20,000 articles from the journal Science, and out popped this map of the underlying themes in the collection. So each node here is a topic. I'm going to define that more formally later, but you can think of it as a group of words associated under a single theme. Right? So here's one: genetic, population, differences, variation. And in this big map, a connection between two topics means that a document about this topic is more likely to also be about this topic than it is, say, to be about this topic. If you're talking about population genetics, you're more likely to talk about mutations than you are to talk about volcanoes. Okay, so AI discovered that. Another example of a topic model is one that takes those topics and now, instead of modeling just groups of words, models how they change over time. So here are two topics discovered, this time from 160,000 articles of Science. This is the entire collection from Science. Each topic, instead of a group of words, is a kind of a trajectory of word energy. And I labeled these topics. They're uncovered by the algorithm. This is theoretical physics, and you can see things like relativity peaking and laser peaking after it's invented. And this is neuroscience, where you can see things like the word neuron increases in steam through the decades, and the word nerve decreases in steam. The word oxygen is interesting there. It peaks in the 40s and 50s and then quickly decays. And I went and looked into the data why that happened. And what happened was they did all these experiments on people, depriving them of oxygen and then asking them to solve difficult math problems. And Science magazine published these experiments and determined that oxygen is important to doing math, but then of course it quickly fell out of favor. But this also highlights an actual statistical advantage of topic models. It's not that oxygen lost steam in the journal Science over time. It's that in this context, in the context of neuroscience, which is a context that the algorithm discovered, the word oxygen increased and decreased. Here's another example from that same fit of what's called the dynamic topic model to Science. So now, rather than taking a single word and plotting its energy over time, I'm looking at the pattern of words and how it itself changes over time. And this is one topic from that model. And so you can see in 1880, this topic has words like electric, machine, power, engine, steam, iron, battery, wire. It moves through the decades. In 1940, air, tube, apparatus, and so on. 1970, air, heat, power, system, temperature. And in 2000, device, materials, silicon technology, and so on. You can see that this is capturing the scientific apparatus that we use to perform experiments and do science as it changed through the decades. And again, none of these articles are marked. This is about scientific apparatus. Here's the section of the article about scientific apparatus. The algorithm uncovers that there is this recurring pattern of words, and that recurring pattern slowly changed over time, and we recognize it as following the change in scientific technology through the decades. So these are the kinds of ways that we can take text in and out pop organization and understanding of what's in those texts. We can use topic models with other kinds of data. Here they're used to annotate images. And the same kinds of algorithms, topic modeling algorithms, can be adapted, I'm going to allude to this at the end of today's talk, to many different kinds of data. So here we're using a similar type of model, but instead of uncovering topics in a collection, we're uncovering overlapping communities in a large network. And you can use these kinds of models to analyze genes and to analyze all kinds of other kinds of data. Okay, so the insight that we had recently is that people read documents. And these might be people for whom we want to form predictions. Okay, so here is Charles Darwin's library. Charles Darwin read a lot of books. And here's a picture familiar to you, the New York City subway, where people are reading various books and electronic devices. So one thing we want to do with information about people reading the documents is, of course, recommend articles to them, recommend books to the people on the subway so they have something that they like to read. But also, I hope I can show you today that collective reading behavior is an additional signal about how the documents are organized. All right, so it's one thing to say, okay, to this woman reading the Harvard Psychedelic Club, here's another book you might be interested in, a Timothy Leary book or whatever. But knowing what Charles Darwin read, we obviously can't make recommendations to Charles Darwin anymore, but knowing what Charles Darwin read tells us something about where those books live in the context of the broader scientific literature. And I'm going to show you how we can use massive databases of people's reading behavior to uncover those kinds of ideas. Okay, and feel free to interrupt me with questions. I know you have to push the button to do them, but please feel free to interrupt. Okay, so this talk, I'm first going to give you an introduction to topic modeling, tell you about the basics. Then talk about this new work where we recommend and explore document collections using user-reader behavior. And then finally, I want to spend a few minutes on the bigger picture. What larger field is this work a part of, which is basically using probability models to solve problems with data? Okay. So how did I make all those pictures from the beginning? The basic idea behind the simplest topic model is that documents exhibit multiple topics. Okay, so here's an article from the journal Science again, called Seeking Life's Bare Genetic Necessities. And this article is about determining the number of genes that an organism needs to survive in the evolutionary sense over tens of thousands of years. Okay, and the authors did some genetics, they did some data analysis, and so on. And what I've done by hand here, I think I have to use this. Oops. Okay. What I've done by hand here is highlighted different words with different colors. So words like predictions, this is very fun. Words like predictions, computer, analysis, computer, numbers, words about data analysis I highlighted in blue. Words like genes, genetics, sequence, genome, words about genetics I highlighted in yellow, and words like organism, survive, life, words about evolutionary biology I highlighted in pink. So if I took the time and highlighted every word in this article, and then if you squinted at it, you would see that it blends blue, pink, and yellow. It blends data analysis, evolutionary biology, and genetics. And that's the intuition behind the simplest topic model, latent Dirichlet allocation. What we do is we take that intuition and we turn it into a probability model, a generative probabilistic model, which if you're not familiar with, it's best to become familiar with this idea by an example. And here's an example. What do we do? So now we can finally define a topic more rigorously. So we're going to define a process by which we assume the data are generated, these documents arise, and on the outside of the collection are a set of topics. Each topic is a distribution over a fixed vocabulary. Okay, it's like a weighted die where the faces of the die are vocabulary words, and each topic is biased in a different way. So here's the data analysis topic. Words like data, number, computer have high probability. Here's the neuroscience topic. Words like brain, neuron, nerve have high probability. Evolutionary biology, genetics, and so on. And you can imagine there are 100 topics sitting here outside of the collection. And the way we imagine every document arises is by first choosing a distribution over topics. That's this cartoon histogram here, where I've chosen the pink, yellow, and blue topics with some probability. Then for each word, choose a colored coin from this distribution. Here I chose the blue coin. Look up which topic it corresponds to, and then draw a word at random from that topic. Here I chose the word analysis. Repeat this for every word in the document. Here I chose the word genetic. Here I chose the word life, and so on. And this is how we generate, probabilistically, a document. I'm sure you all realize this is not how documents actually are created. But the idea is that it captures the fact, the intuition, that documents reflect multiple topics. When you turn the page of Science, you choose a new distribution over topics. Notice, it's important that the topics stay the same. The population of topics from which we draw from stays the same in the next scientific article. You choose a new distribution. This one might be about data analysis and neuroscience, and choose the words from that.
The initial choice
let me get there. Okay. This is the generative process. This is the statistical model that we're going to work with. Your question is a good one. What's the main computational problem? The main computational problem is this. What we are given is a big stack of documents. And our goal, the algorithmic goal, the statistical goal, is to fill in all of this hidden structure. What are the topics that each word was drawn from? What are the topic proportions that reflect this article? And possibly most interesting, what are the topics themselves that reflect this big collection of millions of articles? Okay, so that's LDA. Now, as a graphical model, so in the world of probabilistic modeling, we like to represent our models as graphical models. These are directed graphs, directed acyclic graphs, where nodes are random variables and edges denote a dependence between random variables. As a graphical model, LDA looks like this. Okay, so I can just right, I said this. Nodes are random variables. Edges denote dependence between random variables. These plates denote replication. You'll understand that in a second. And shaded nodes are observed. Everything else is hidden. So the way this works is, just like I described on the last slide, for each, there are k topics. These are beta that live outside of the collection. So each beta is a distribution over words, data analysis, neuroscience, et cetera. And for each document that's inside this D plate, I first choose a distribution over topics, theta. Those are the topic proportions. And then for each, that's the cartoon histogram. Then for each word in the document, that's the N plate, I choose the colored coin that corresponds for that word. Here I chose, say, the blue coin. And then I choose a word from the corresponding topic. Okay, you can see how that generative process is encoded in this graphical model. What's nice is that this graphical model encodes a formal factorized probability distribution over hidden variables and observed variables. All that's observed are the words of the documents and how they're organized into documents. Everything else is hidden structure that we want to uncover. So this describes formally a factorized joint distribution over hidden and observed variables, and it connects to the algorithms we need to compute the hidden variables, to estimate what the topics are, the topic proportions, and so on. Okay, so that picture I showed you in the beginning is encoded as a graphical model like this. Okay. In more detail, that joint distribution of topic proportions, topic assignments, and topics defines a posterior distribution. Given the articles, what is the conditional distribution of all that hidden structure? And the idea behind topic modeling is to then use posterior expectations of those variables to perform whatever task it is we have at hand: information retrieval, document similarity, prediction, recommendation, whatever it is. Okay, this is how, in the beginning of the talk, I gave you this three-step process: discover the topics, annotate the documents, and then use those annotations. This is how that plays out statistically, where discovering the topics amounts to estimating this conditional distribution. What is the hidden structure that most likely generated my data? And then filling in all of those amounts to performing posterior expectations and then using them as though a person told you that this is about topic 5 and topic 9. Okay, I won't talk about algorithms today, but if you're curious, I have a slide at the end about my favorite algorithm for doing topic modeling. But there are many, many ways to estimate that conditional distribution, the hidden variables given the documents. Okay, and I won't talk about any of them unless you ask at the end. Take as given that we can take a big collection of documents, we can define a probability model, and then we can fill in all of the hidden structure. Okay. Good question. So in these models, in this simple model, those topics are conditionally independent. Given that I know that a document's about neuroscience and data analysis, one word being from the neuroscience topic and another word being from the data analysis topic, these are independent events. A more complicated model, and there are such models, are ones where there's a sequence of words and it does model that transition. Yep. Okay, how does this work in practice? Actually, I won't tell you that, but I'll just give you an example of this in practice. So we took the OCR collection of Science magazine for 10 years. This is 17,000 documents, 11 million words. We used a vocabulary of 20,000 terms. Okay, this is a small collection of documents. Stop words, words like the, but, of, are removed, and rare words are removed too. to make inference easier. And we fit a 100-topic LDA model using an algorithm called variational inference. So this is basically, we took 17,000 science articles, put them in the stack, and filled in all of those hidden variables. All right, here is that article that I showed you in the beginning, Seeking Life's Bare Genetic Necessities. And recall, this is about determining the number of genes that an organism needs to survive. And I just drew fake thetas for you, but here is the real theta. Okay, in the x-axis are 100 topics. The y-axis is probability, and these are this is the distribution over topics that represents this article. Okay, so just to be clear, we took 17,000 articles, we learned the 100 topics, and now we're asking which of those 100 topics does this one exhibit, and here they are. And you can see that even though there are 100 topics that the model has to play with, only a handful of them are activated to describe the words of this article. Further, if we look at the most frequent words from the most frequent topics that describe this article, you can see that they place their mass on genetics, evolutionary biology, diseases, survival, and data analysis. And I want to emphasize here that this idea, the idea of genetics, the idea of evolutionary biology, these aren't built into the model at all, right? That emerged from analyzing the documents themselves. These are significant patterns of co-occurring words. So I mentioned I won't say anything about algorithms, unless you ask at the end. But you can still understand how this works, how these kinds of sharp patterns of word use emerge from the model, the LDA model, just by thinking about what the posterior does. And basically, the reason this works is that the posterior tries to trade off two goals. One, it wants each document to be about as few topics as possible. Okay, so if I hand you a document, you don't want to say, oh, this is about 96 of my 100 topics. You want to say this is about 5 or 4. It wants that topic proportions vector to be sparse. And two, it wants the topics to be sparse too. It wants the topics to place their mass on few terms. If you're going to learn a topic, you don't want to say that 17,000 of the 20,000 terms have some probability. You want to say that most of the probabilities are close to 0 and only a handful of the terms have high probability. Excuse me. Now, these two goals simultaneously are at odds. Think about this. If you take a document and you say, okay, I want as few topics as possible for this document, put it in one topic, that means that that topic has to place its mass on all of the words in that document. Okay, and so that violates the second goal of trying to make the topic sparse. But similarly, if you put very few words in each topic, then in order to explain the many words of a document, you need many topics, and that makes the first goal difficult. Okay, so somehow trading off these goals in the posterior is why LDA finds these tightly co-occurring words. Okay, so to summarize, LDA discovers themes or topics through posterior inference, a conditional distribution of hidden variables given observations. And this model really stems from the seminal work on latent semantic analysis from the 90s from psychologists. In statistics, this idea is called a mixed membership model. Okay, for those of you that are familiar with mixture models, the LDA model is like a mixture model, but so each document comes from a mixture model. It has topic proportions, and each observation in the document comes from a different topic. But the mixture components are shared across documents. Okay, so it's like you have these group data, each of which comes from a mixture model with shared mixture components, but individual mixture proportions. And this in statistics is called a mixed membership model. It's used in a variety of settings. LDA, I won't explain it, but can be thought of as a type of PCA or matrix factorization. And it's interesting that this same idea was independently invented to study population genetics. If we sequence all of our genomes and put them in a bag and we want to understand what the structure is in all of our genomes, well, we all are a mix of some, I can't remember what they call them. Okay, well, basically, a long time ago, there were groups of people living on Earth, and then they started migrating and mixing, and we reflect that. But we don't have access to those people anymore, of course. They lived many years ago. So what this type of model can do is uncover what those original populations' genetic signature were based on our current observation, our current genomes. And this model is widely used to correct for ancestry when doing things like genome-wide association analysis. I don't know much about genetics, so I know that this audience probably does, so forgive the errors in what I just said. Okay. What's interesting about LDA is that it's a simple building block, and this is really something we'll get to at the end when we talk about probability models, that enables a lot of applications. Like I've alluded to some of them earlier. You can build LDA-like models that account for time series, LDA-like models that account for hierarchies, LDA-like models that account for connections between topics, that connect images to words, things like that. Here are some examples from the research literature of probability models that use LDA as a component. What's happened, of course, is that organizing and finding patterns in large data sets has become important in many fields, in social science, natural science, the humanities, industry, culture. And algorithmic improvements to LDA and to, in more broadly, graphical model inference let us fit these kinds of models to massive data sets. Okay, so again, I'll get to this more at the end of the talk, but I want to say it here now in case we don't get to the end. That LDA really can be thought of as a case study, or topic modeling can be thought of as a case study in doing text analysis with probability models. And I like this picture, which divides up the different activities. We build a model. This might be the simple LDA model, or it might be an LDA model that takes into account time or hierarchy or whatever it is you want to do. Then, with your data and your model, you infer the hidden structure. This is the algorithmic component. This is filling in all of the hidden structure based on the assumptions you made when you built the model. And then finally, you use those inferences to form predictions, explore your data, make pictures, et cetera. What topic modeling research is research in developing new models. I'll show you that in the next part of the talk. Developing new inference algorithms. How can we make inference faster, more accurate? Can we prove things about inference? And developing new applications, visualizations, tools. What are some ways we can use? Let's say I have 10 billion tweets and I fit an LDA model to it. What good is that? What can I do with it? I don't know. Okay, one last thing before we get to user behavior data. For those of you that want to get going with this, LDA models are very easy to start to play with. So this is an example of using R to fit an LDA model. There's a package in R called LDA. And you start out with a bunch of documents. You turn them into some kind of sparse representation. So each term in the vocabulary corresponds to an integer here. And this is just a sparse vector that says that in this document, there are 193 unique terms. Term number 569, maybe it's feathers, occurs one time, and so on. And then with 5 lines of R, so this was done with the science articles. With 5 lines of R, in 20 minutes or less, you can look at what was in those articles. So here are the 20 topics that we learned from those 5 lines of R. Okay. Great. So that's all I wanted to say about topic modeling. Yeah?
So you're inferring topics from the distribution of words. So you don't care about the order of words is irrelevant?
Yeah. Right, exactly. So the model, as you saw, pays no attention to the order of words, and that relates to the other question too. That conditioned on the topic proportions, the words can appear in any order. So that's totally unrealistic, right? We know that word order is very important in documents, but if you think of the inferential goal, the goal of just understanding the broad semantic themes that are brushed across a collection of documents, imagine I took that article that I showed you about genetics and data analysis and I jumbled all the words. You wouldn't be able to read it, it's true, but you could stare at it and say, you know, this has something to do with genetics, something to do with data analysis. And so in that sense, this exchangeability assumption is okay, and moreover, it makes inference more powerful. We can do more because of assuming exchangeability. When the more structure you add to your model, the more complexity you add to your model, the more difficult inference becomes. Yeah?
So along those same lines, if you're working in a domain where citations matter,
Yeah.
and references, so you think about the law where it builds on prior references and precedents, you're going to probably need to modify your model to
Yes.
Or just be a word like citation?
Yeah. So I mean, again, I hopefully we'll get to this at the end. The point is not that this one little model, the simple LDA model, can solve all your problems. Rather, the idea of expressing your assumptions in terms of factorized probability distributions of hidden and observed variables, but being thrifty with your assumptions in that don't model sequences of words if you don't really care about word order, if word order is not part of your inferential goal, that doing that is a powerful language for solving problems with data. But we'll get to that at the end, I think. Yeah. I mean, to answer your question, we've worked on models that take into account citation and how citation matters. We've also worked on models that take into account influence, that an article published in 2 articles published in 1905, one by Einstein and one by somebody who's not Einstein. Later on, we should be able to figure out which of those articles had impact. Yeah.
I can see some insidious uses, applications for this kind of analysis.
Yeah.
For instance, Google might be using this kind of analysis to decide what advertisements to present to us.
That's right.
And the NSA could be using it to ferret out all kinds of information about not just saboteurs and terrorists, but any kind of illegal operations or personal information.
Yeah.
Is that being used that way?
I don't know about the latter, but I know Google's definitely has played with this. Yeah. Okay, so people read documents, as I mentioned earlier. You probably have read one yourself. And so what I want to talk about next are what we call collaborative topic models. These are models that connect the content of the documents to people consuming the documents, to us monitoring how people consume the documents. And there are definitely bad applications of that, but also not bad applications. Here are some not bad ones. What can we do when we do that? Well, one, we can help people find documents they are interested in, do recommendation in an intelligent way. We can learn about how people reading documents implicitly organizes them. So if our goal is this vague goal of just understanding the structure of this collection, we're lawyers, say, and we got 10 bazillion emails, we want to understand what's in them. And we can also learn about the people reading the documents, what those people are interested in, and then what patterns of interests there are out there. Okay, so as an example, as the running example, and the example that we're interested in my group as an application, scientists like to share their research libraries, okay? And so here's an example. We have data from Mendeley, which is an online service for scientists to organize and share their research library. And what we get from Mendeley is totally anonymized, a big matrix where the columns are users. So each column is a scientist, and each row is a paper. Okay, so here are some papers, the EM paper, conditional random fields, variational methods, and so on. And a black square in this matrix means that this user, user 5, has the conditional random field article in her library. Okay, what can we do with that? Well, with collaborative topic models applied to both the text of the papers and this kind of user behavior matrix, we can form recommendations in 2 ways. One, we can recommend old articles to people. So we can recommend the conditional random field article, which is a classic old article, to someone who is just getting involved in machine learning. But we can also recommend new articles. So here's topic models for recommendation, an article no one has read yet. We can recommend that article to people using these kinds of methods. And then, I think this is most interesting, we can identify impactful and interdisciplinary articles. This is what I mean by we can use the reader patterns to learn something about how the documents are organized. I'll show you that. Okay, here's the basic idea. Consider the EM paper. How many of you know about the EM paper? Okay, fair number of you. How many of you have read it? Some of that subset. The EM paper is a classic paper in statistics from 1977, and it's about maximum likelihood estimation, finding maximum likelihood estimates in models where there are hidden variables, kind of like the stuff we're talking about here. All right, so you have a model with hidden variables. How do you find an MLE of the parameters? The EM algorithm. The EM, expectation maximization. EM has, is a revolution in statistics. They didn't know that in 1977 necessarily when they wrote the paper, but since it came out, the EM algorithm is used everywhere, in computational biology, in machine learning, in computer vision, in natural language processing. It's everywhere. But let's go back to 1977 and pretend that the EM paper just came out. And here is the abstract. So if you read the abstract, a broadly applicable algorithm for computing maximum likelihood estimates from incomplete data is presented at various levels of generality. Read the whole abstract, you know that this is a boring, dusty statistics article. Okay? It's a brilliant article, brilliant idea, but that abstract would not be of interest to anybody who's not a statistician. Okay, anyway, topic models help us with this abstract. They tell us, let's say there are two topics, computer vision and statistics. Topic models tell us that this article is about one thing, and that is statistics. Now, let's suppose in 1977 there are two types of scientists, computer vision researchers and statisticians. Okay, computer vision researchers are interested in vision, statisticians are interested in statistics. We see the EM paper, we learn it's about statistics. Who are we going to recommend it to? We're going to recommend it to the statisticians. Okay? Now, let's suppose we have this user behavior data from Mendeley. We know who is reading which paper. That tells us, if we have organized things correctly, that tells us that computer vision researchers are all reading the EM paper somehow. Okay? So the computer vision folks are interested in the EM paper, and so we can put a spike in our representation of the EM paper under computer vision. Now, let's consider our scientists again, statisticians and vision researchers, and now we're going to recommend the EM paper to computer vision researchers. This is the intuition behind this model, and here's the thing. Without text, without seeing the abstract of the EM paper, we can't initially recommend it to anyone, right? The EM paper would come out and it would just fall into the garbage with all the other papers. Without user data, we would never recommend this to computer vision researchers. Without user data, we could never learn that the EM paper is of more broad interest. Okay, so I showed you one graphical model, so you understand those. That intuition is conveyed in this graphical model. And now you can see, let's explain how this works. So here you can see the LDA model from earlier as a sub-model of this larger model. So here are the words of the documents, and they're drawn from an LDA model. So here are their topic proportions, theta. But now we have this new plate, U. This is the user plate. And VUD is user use vote on document D. It's a 1 if you have it in your library. It's a 0 otherwise. And XU is what you are interested in. Okay? XU is the user use preferences. Where does VUD come from? Right? Does Asaf have an article in his library? It comes from two things. One, it comes from what that article is about, theta. Theta are the topic proportions for that article, and that is part of whether or not we recommend this article to Asaf. And the other one is zeta, which we call the correction. Okay, zeta is a free variable a priori, but given user data, zeta adjusts itself, adapts itself to correct for who is actually reading the article. So zeta is where we see that computer vision researchers, natural language processing researchers are reading the EM article. And so if there's an old article that's not anything about the kind of math that Asaf is interested in, but that everyone who's interested in that kind of math is reading, then zeta is going to capture that, and we're going to say, Asaf, you missed this one. Everyone's reading it. You better get on it. That's how it works. Okay, for those of you that are interested in the details, I won't give all the details, but this one little detail is interesting. Basically, this is like doing matrix factorization, where XU are the user preferences, as in classical matrix factorization. But now the representation of the document has two pieces. One is theta D, which also describes the words of the article through the topic model, and zeta D, which describes the correction. So theta D and zeta D are both k vectors. K is the number of topics. And whether or not you're interested in article D has to do with how similar theta D plus zeta D is to your preferences. So two things. One, we get the cold start, this problem of recommending articles immediately, from theta, right? Because theta has to explain the word, so we know something about the article as soon as it's published. But two, XU now is represented in topic space. So, classical matrix factorization, which is how, Netflix recommends movies to you and Amazon recommends books to you. Classical matrix factorization sees you just as a point in some kind of abstract space where you might have high weight in dimension 62. Whereas here, dimension 62 corresponds to a topic that's meaningful because it corresponds to something that also had to generate a bunch of words and some articles. Okay, so this essentially blends matrix factorization-based and content-based recommendation and describes user preferences with interpretable topics. Okay, so we have data like this. We have data from Mendeley, which I mentioned is this online service where scientists can share research libraries with each other. We have 261,000 documents, 80,000 users, 10,000 vocabulary items, and 25 million observed words in the documents with 5.1 million entries. Okay, so what that means is that the 80,000 users collectively had 5.1 million articles in their libraries, and the 250,000 documents had 25 million observed words in their libraries. And we fit that model that I just showed you. We estimated all the hidden variables in this. We have the words, we have the ratings, and we estimated the topics, what people were interested in, what the document is about, and who is actually interested in that document. Okay, let me show you how it worked. Here again is the EM article. All right, dusty old statistics article, but well worth reading. And here is the topic representation. This is the same kind of representation I showed you earlier. All right, so here we have topics in the x-axis, and the model is slightly different. It's not summing to one here because it's a Poisson-based model, but it's the same idea. Here are the topics that this article is about, and you can see that it's about two things: kind of probability models, Bayesian statistics, and algorithms. Okay, that's mostly what this article is about. This is theta. These are the topic proportions, topic weights. Now let's add the correction vector to this article. Okay, here's zeta. So this is theta plus zeta, which is, of course, what we use when we decide whether or not to recommend an article to somebody. And okay, so one thing you see is that here, for algorithms, the EM algorithm is a very popular algorithms paper, right? Because the algorithm spike went way up. People that are interested in algorithms like the EM algorithm. But what's interesting is what's growing out of the weeds here. So here, this topic had no weight. Right? None of the words in the EM paper are about this topic, but here you see computer vision growing out of the weeds, right? Image, object, matching, tracking, motion, segmentation. So if you get on this system and you're interested in a bunch of articles about computer vision, it's going to say, you might think about Don Rubin's EM paper from 1977. Here's another example, network analysis. We'll see this later too. The statistical analysis of networks comes out of the weeds because the EM algorithm has become important in that field as well for doing community detection. Here's another example. How many of you know this book? Okay, good. So what's this about? It's about one thing, right? This book is about convex optimization, and it's an amazing book. And it's also, the authors made it free online, so it's what taught many of us convex optimization in graduate school. And here again is the topic representation of the convex optimization book. All right, you can see that it's about not many things. It's about algorithms, and it's about, I guess, engineering, reconstruction, and things like that. Okay, which is loosely what convex optimization book is about. But again, we add the correction vector, and first, again, you see that here is the algorithms topic, and people interested in algorithms all like the convex optimization book in this data set. But again, some topics grow out of the weeds. Sensor networks and distributed computing, where convex optimization, many of the theoretical problems in sensor networks rely on convex optimization algorithms now. And so those scientists interested in that are all reading the convex optimization book. And finance. So quantitative finance. Of course, convex optimization is very important in that area, and that one also comes out of the weeds. Also, the convex optimization book has a lot of examples of portfolio optimization and things like that, which is why I think a lot of of the scientists interested in finance were reading it. Okay, so that's kind of gives you the intuition behind this model, and you can see this is a model where LDA is used as a component with this other data, user behavior data, to good effect. I have two plots here. Let me just focus on this one. This plot just shows you that this model recommends better than existing models and content-based only models. Basically, factorization models, which are the state of the art, and content-only models, which would be models that only use the text. What we did is we took that big data set, we held out some of the articles from everyone's library, and then we measured how well we predicted those articles from each person. And we did it in two ways. One way was we pretended like the article was never written, right? We took the entire row of the matrix and removed it so that the EM paper was never written. And then we asked, OK, can we predict that you're going to like the EM paper? That's out of matrix prediction. And one is we allowed some subset of people to read the paper so we can learn about who likes it, and then tried to predict it. So notice that matrix factorization, which is what's used all over the internet, can't perform out of matrix prediction. So people do ad hoc things to do it, whereas our model can do both. OK. Like I mentioned, what I think is really interesting about this model, because I'm interested in ways of automatically organizing and characterizing large collections of text, is that the readers also tell us about the articles. Okay? So here are three readers: Darwin reading all those books, there's Einstein reading, and this picture is somebody reading the archive. This is another scientist reading. This is how many of us read nowadays, by looking at the archive and reading articles. Having this data of which articles are in which people's libraries can help us find things like interdisciplinary articles, articles that people in one discipline are reading that aren't about that discipline, influential articles within a field, articles that, well, I'll explain what these are in a second, and outside influences on a field. OK, so let me be concrete with our data set. So we analyzed that big Mendeley data set. Here's one topic from that data set: words like network, connected, modules, nodes, links, topology, connectivity, graph, robustness, connections, modular, world, degree, properties. This topic is about network analysis, the modern field of statistical network analysis. What can we do? Well, one thing we can do is the same thing we can do with LDA. We can ask which articles in my 250,000 articles are about networks. OK, that's a question about theta, about the topic proportions. All right, so one of the articles that's most about networks is this article, Assortative Mixing in Networks. It's an excellent article, by the way. I've read it. And here are the top 3 articles about networks. These are the articles that are most about networks in that their text most reflects that topic. OK? Let's ask another question. Which articles are about networks that are read by users interested in networks? So what's that question about? So this first question is just about the theta value for networks. The second question is about theta plus zeta for networks. Okay, these are articles that are about networks and also that have a high value of theta plus zeta in the networks topic. If I'm interested in networks, which I am, then will I be interested in this article? And here are the top 3 articles that are read by users interested in networks. You can see it's a different list than this list. So for example, this first article, Emergence of Scaling in Random Networks, this is an article by Barabasi that was published in Science, and some people claim that this article basically launched statistical network analysis. I'm pretty sure Barabasi claims that, among others. In fact, he does. And this article is from a Science article 10 years later where he said, you know, that article had an impact, and he's right. More interesting, or another interesting thing we can do, is ask, OK, which articles are about networks? So which articles have a high value of theta for networks? The text is about networks, but they're read by users in other fields. OK, these are interdisciplinary articles. So here's other fields, and the zeta for the other fields is high, and actually this picture is a little misleading. It's not that zeta is low in networks. It's just it has to be high in other fields to make it onto this list. These are articles that are about networks, but that people who like other things are reading. And you can see different kinds of articles here. Here, mapping the structural core of human cerebral cortex, that's what that picture's from. That's an article about neuroscience that has to do with networks. Okay, so this is an article about neuroscience that, this is an article about the application of network analysis to neuroscience. Okay, so it's about networks, but neuroscientists read this article. Network thinking in ecology and evolution, same idea. It's about network science, but people in ecology and evolution are reading it. And then this one, Linked, The New Science of Networks, this is also by Barabasi. This is a popular science book, right? So of course that is going to have high interest in other subjects and is about networks. Okay, so again, this list, different from this list. This is people interested in network analysis, what are they reading? This is people interested in other fields, which network papers are they reading? You can imagine what the last question is, what are papers that are not about networks that people interested in networks are reading? All right, so in other words, now we say, I want articles that are not about networks. I'm really interested in networks, but I feel like reading something else now. What should I read that other people like me are reading? And that says I want theta to be small, the topic proportions to be small, but I want zeta, the correction vector in the networks topic, to be large. And here's what they're reading. They're reading things like power law distributions in empirical data, right? Power laws became very important in studying networks, and so this paper, which in fact is by a bunch of network scientists, it's not about networks from the perspective of its abstract, but it's widely read by people interested in networks. And then papers about statistical physics, papers more about the kinds of distributions that people who care about networks also care about. Okay, so this is the way that we can use this structure of user data and text data to understand what's going on in the collection. Okay, and we can ask these questions about any field. All right, so here is statistical modeling. One of the topics was about Bayesian modeling. What is about statistical modeling read by people interested in statistical modeling? Well, here are three. These are all classical papers in Bayesian statistics. One is introduced the Dirichlet process. The other is important for assessing model complexity. And this is a book about MCMC methods, which are, of course, the basis of many approximate inference techniques. Look at the difference between the top list and the second list. This is about probabilistic modeling, but read by people in other fields. Here's where the EM paper shows up. Okay, the EM paper is not necessarily in the top 10 here, but it shows up as one of the papers about statistical modeling that has had the most interdisciplinary impact. And then here are two tutorials, right? Which of course, somebody who is reading about the Dirichlet process doesn't need a tutorial about Bayesian networks and influence diagrams, but people in other fields who want to get involved in that will read a tutorial. And then about other fields, but read by people in this field, you have basic papers and books about statistics. Okay, it's very fun to just continually explore the data like this. Here is algorithms. Here you see convex optimization being one of the most widely read algorithms paper. Introduction to algorithms being one of the most interdisciplinary algorithms books. And what are people who are interested in algorithms reading about when they're not reading about algorithms? Well, they're reading about things like compressive sensing and information theory. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about collaborative topic models. They connect text to usage, text to people reading text, blends content-based and user-based recommendation methods. But again, what I think is quite interesting is it opens new windows into how people read, into how we might organize these documents by using how people are reading. Okay, the first version of this model, although it's not the one that I used here, is Wang and Blei 2011. We're preparing a paper about the next one, and there's software on my website if you want to fit these models to large data sets. Any questions about that work before we go to the discussion? Yeah.
Saying reading. Actually, what you have is that you have to push your button.
Yeah, people are clicking.
So you mentioned reading, and but basically what you have is people sharing their library.
That's right.
And there's a difference. So I think the most famous example is Ulysses. Many people like to display it in their library, but very few actually read it.
Yep, EM paper is the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So I said reading to kind of make ideas concrete, but of course, right, we're modeling clicks, essentially. In fact, some of the new work we're doing with this model, one is to take archive history, people clicking on archive articles and trying to understand how archive articles are organized using those clicks. And the other is using clicks on a newspaper website. So we have many clicks from a newspaper website and try to understand how people click on newspaper articles. That's right, I think a model, actually in the archive there is this, we don't have the reading distinction because we can't know whether or not anyone actually read the article, but we do have a distinction between someone clicking on the abstract and downloading the PDF. And innovating these kinds of models maybe in order to capture various degrees of attention would be very interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So have you done any comparison of your network to actual references from the articles?
No. So, right, because we're looking at a separate signal of people having these articles in their libraries, though on my list of things I am dying to do would be to take the world history scientific literature, collect all the citations from it, match those to the authors of the papers, declare that to be the library, right? Take the set of papers that Einstein cited and the union of that is his library, and now build recommendation systems and understand that data this way. Yeah.
Just a question about how you generate the dictionary of topics that you're going to be using in your analysis. Do you are you reliant on user-generated tags, or do you have
No, this is just like in the beginning. It's all inference. So all of that stuff is hidden from view,
Right.
and we use posterior inference not on the simple model, but on the more complicated model. And that learns the topics and what people are interested in and how the documents are corrected to account for what people are interested
Isn't there
in.
some kind of a training where you have to say for this topic, I mean, we're going to expect a distribution of these words for a given topic?
Again, those are the algorithm. I can mention the algorithms at the end. Yeah, that's the idea is that comes from a conditional distribution, and now you've just reduced your problem to the problem of computing a conditional distribution. And so we use general purpose algorithms for that.
And also, are you using full text or abstracts, or do you weight things differently if they're in the title, abstract, or the main body?
In this case, these are just abstracts,
Okay.
but it's a good idea to use full text if we can, and then to think about how a more complicated model still might involve abstract, title, author, full text citation.
Yeah, if you include the references, that could screw things up based on if they're looking at different topics that maybe are unrelated or something like that.
Well, you're pessimistic. I think
Yeah.
it could help.
it could work.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm not sure whether this is on topic enough, but what's your take on sort of the current work going on for probabilistic programming models and sort of tools like that to help with exploring the model space for these sorts of domains?
I'll get to that in the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you thought about correlating the interest in other topics with potential scientific output in the related topics?
What do you mean?
So, for example, statistics, and then later those papers about using the methods from the end.
Yeah, and of course that happened in machine learning and artificial intelligence too. Yeah, that too is on the kind of list of things we would love to play with, and especially within the context of the archive data where we really have a long history, and you can maybe see how people's preferences change over time, and that would be a more complicated model, a time series model. Good. Okay, well that's good for seeding the, oh yeah, behind the pillar.
You mentioned a few books. Have you tried it for like Google engrams or like a big list of books?
Well, we have fit topic models to a big collection of books, yes, though we don't have the user reader data on that data set. Google engrams, of course, doesn't give you document boundaries, so we can't really do complicated things like this with that. Yeah. Okay, so what's the bigger picture here? There's whatever you want to call it, statistics, machine learning, data science. This is the data science symposium, so we'll call it data science here. Inside that is a large world of probability models, probabilistic modeling, and then topic modeling is just one piece of that larger world of applied probabilistic modeling. At first, when I made the slide, I put topic modeling in the center just by default, and then that was criticized. So topic modeling in a nondescript place somewhere in probabilistic modeling land. So what is applied probabilistic modeling? It's 3 steps. Step 1, assume your data come from a model with hidden variables. That model is incorrect, I assure you. you remember, as we said before, we're thinking of the model in terms of the eventual inferences we want to make from it. But that's step one, is to build a model like this on your whiteboard, where there are observations, your fMRI data or your genomic sequences or your user behavior data or your text data or your images. And then there is a scaffolding of hidden structure around it that represents the underlying patterns and correlations and things like that that you think exist in your data that you want to uncover. Okay, that's step one. And okay, we'll get to that in a second. Step two. Take that model and infer what the hidden variables are from your data set. Okay, so you had a neuroscientist over and you made a complicated model of fMRI data on your whiteboard, and now he hands you 6 terabytes of fMRI data, and your goal is to take that model you drew on the whiteboard and fill in all of the hidden structure given the 6 terabytes of fMRI data. And I can promise you that to do that, you should just solve this. Okay. This is underlying all of the pictures I showed you in this talk, where P of x, z, and beta is the model. X is observed, z and beta are hidden. And anyway, I can explain this somewhere else. But the point is that inference problem becomes basically an optimization problem, okay? Or a problem of computing a conditional distribution. Step 3. Use the results of that, use your estimation of the conditional distribution to do whatever it is you're trying to do. Call back the neuroscientist, say, hey, I've got all the hidden structure. Now let's visualize brains and make predictions about what people are thinking and so on. All right, and that's how we get these kinds of pictures with those 3 steps. So I like this picture, as I mentioned earlier, for describing that process. Right? We build the model. With the data in the model, we infer the hidden structure. We use those inferences to form predictions and explore. And why do I like this picture? Well, one, customized data analysis has become important to many fields. We mentioned this earlier, that in the social science, political science, natural science, culture, technology, we have specific data analysis needs. Every data set is different, has different assumptions we want to make about it. Every problem we want to solve with it is different. And so what we want is a language and a pipeline for solving many different kinds of data analysis problems. This pipeline separates the natural activities of making assumptions about hidden structure in data, computing under those assumptions, and then using the results of that computation to solve a problem, application. Okay, and the way it works now is to solve data science problems, somebody with a data science problem comes into my office, and miraculously, people who know nothing of probability models are very good, but experts in their domain are good at drawing these kinds of diagrams on the board. They can start drawing circles and arrows where things depend on each other, things are observed, things are hidden, things are replicated, and then presto, that's a factorized joint distribution. Then what happens now, this gets to your question about probabilistic programming, is that my students and postdocs and I spend 1 week to 5 years trying to figure out an algorithm to infer the complicated hidden brain structure that Ken Norman drew on my whiteboard. And then we call them up, like I said, and predict and explore. So it separates these activities, which facilitates this kind of collaborative work between scientists and machine learning statistician type people. Okay, who need a name? What do we need to do this? We need expressive components from which to build models. So one activity in statistical machine learning is to develop this language, the language of assumptions that graphical models express, and to expand it. Right? What kinds of graphical models can we build? What kinds of what are the parameters inside which we need to work? Scalable and generic inference algorithms. This is new. Okay, not this isn't new, but this is important now that there are so many kinds of problems out there that we want to solve, and this relates to probabilistic programming, right? The broken part of the process is that we design algorithms to specific models, but what we need are methods where in comes a probability model and out pops an algorithm, and that's what probabilistic programming is. And so to answer your question, what do I think of it? I think it's awesome. I want it right now. And unlike teleportation, I think it's possible. But I don't know anything about teleportation. That might be possible too. Finally, we need to stretch probabilistic modeling into new areas. Once we have a language for describing assumptions and a way to articulate it so that anybody can build probability models, and then once we have this magic system that any probability model can be used as input into, and out pops an algorithm you can run on your data, well, then you can start doing things with probability models in places where you couldn't before, where there was a block. And so as an example of that, historians and English professors who don't necessarily have a background in statistics and machine learning have started to use models like this to do their research, to facilitate close reading and making connections between documents and so on. There's something else we need, which is to revive the lost art of model checking, model criticism, and model revision. And so this is really not just a one-shot deal. It is if it takes us 5 years to come up with an algorithm. At that point, you're married to your model, right? There's no going back. But really, it could be an iterative process, especially if probabilistic programming comes to fruition, where we build a model, we perform inferences. We don't just then go and use it and launch the rocket. Rather, we look at where it goes right and wrong and criticize it and revise it to get a better model and so on. But of course, this problem is well studied by statisticians in the 70s and 80s and a little bit in the 90s. But the scale of data and the kinds of problems we have now, we don't know how to do this yet. It's an important open issue. It's a fuzzy open issue, too. OK. Oh, 0. That's my talk. LDA, collaborative modeling, discussion. And then I like this 45-year-old quote or something, 50-year-old quote by John Tukey. We should seek out unfamiliar summaries of observational material and establish their useful properties. More novelty can come from finding and evading deeper lying constraints. I think of modern statistical machine learning as trying to see through this kind of agenda. Thanks very much.